a written production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started. So it looks like our communication team has done a really good job because you obviously found the new location. So welcome to our, I think, maybe fifth installment of, seventh installment. Who's counting though? Clearly. So I'm going to, as you guys can see for yourselves, all of the hard work that's going on. The wall is coming down, and we're starting to pile up the soils, and so the rain has stopped for a while, so that's going to help out a lot. So with that, I'm just going to kick it off to PAI and Corey and let him give you his update.
All right, good afternoon. It's a nicer room. Everybody's a little bit tighter and closer together. It looks like more of you, but I think it's the same and just not so spread out. So we are making progress, but we're also have an issue that we're working through relative to how much soil there is on the bottom. One of the unknowns on the project all along was what it would look like when we got the lake drained. The way that the lake drained, we were able to see the side slopes, and you guys all saw that for a long time. We saw the side slope conditions, and we were thinking that our estimates were pretty accurate because the side slopes were looking like the testing that we had done, which showed that there was almost no material laying on the side slopes, and the lake drained and drained and drained, and then all of a sudden we got to the bottom and we had 30 acres of plus bottom, and we found out that there's considerably more material on the bottom than what was expected. So we had expected a total quantity of about 16,000 cubic yards of material, and the plan was to export all of that to the Glendale landfill. We now estimate there's somewhere between 70 and 80,000 yards of material, so it's significantly more. And the Glendale landfill is not really a good option. It sounds like it's on, but I don't. Can you guys hear me? Or? It's hard. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So we have considerably more material. So while we're working through with RCSC on what options are, and the options are trucking it all off, or to process it on site and reuse it in the work. So we're working through that with them, and we're almost there. We thought we were done with it. Well, I thought we were done with it, but we're not, because Bill and his team's doing their job, and they're holding our feet to the fire, and they're asking questions, and they're pushing us on finding ways to stay in the budget. And so that's the goal, and that's been the goal since day one. It's been a clear directive to work with inside the budget that has been set. And so we're continuing to work through that issue. In the meantime, we have continued to progress the work. We've got about 75 or 80% of the shoreline demolished. It's sitting in piles on the floor, which has always been the plan. That material is going to go into the future fish habitat. We've been accumulating and picking up all the old fish habitat. We've been pulling down trees and moving rocks along the park edge and along the commercial property. And we've been pushing the material on the slopes and on the toe of the slope. So the slope comes down, the lake slope comes down, and then it hits the bottom, and the bottom of the lake's flat. So we've cleared the slope, and we've pushed about 40 feet of material around the edge to give us access, because we need to start rebuilding the shoreline, and that's what the goal has always been, is to get to the shoreline and rebuild the shoreline. And so we should be done pushing material off the slopes and getting it all on the bottom in the next 3 or 4 weeks, certainly before the end of the month of February. Again, if weather changes, would change that if we couldn't work, but as long as we can continue to work, we'll have the slopes all cleaned, all the material sitting on the bottom, and we'll be ready to start the regrading of the slopes. We need to get rid of the material that's on the bottom because it's in our way. It's in our way because it's, it looks like there's a lot of room down there, but there's really not a lot of room down there by the time you have to work around the piled up dirt, and we have to work around the debris piles. So we're in the process of finalizing that and getting through that. The downside to this problem is it looks like it's going to extend the project potentially up until October, which is not something any of us want, because it puts us back in the monsoon cycles again. And we want to be, from our point of view, we want to be out at the bottom of the lake before that happens. So we're trying to figure out how to bring that together and make that happen. I don't have anything else. We're in a different room, so we don't have anything on any monitors or not because we can't put anything up. But we've adjusted a schedule. We have an adjusted schedule. And we need a decision in the next week or two on how we're going to handle the materials so that we can, start processing that material on the floor. That's in PAI's lab. RCSC is waiting for us to get them a response on a couple of questions that they've asked. And we're working on that. And I believe we'll get a quick response once we get back. That's my understanding. But that's where we're at. So, Bill, I don't have anything else, Bill.
No, I don't. Just with respect to the options, there's obviously positives and negatives with respect to whatever option we choose, right? Some will elongate the schedule. Some will help us keep the schedule a little closer to where we thought it was going to be. Some are going to cost a lot more, some not as much. And so we're trying to weigh making sure that we keep within budget, both from a cost perspective and from a time perspective. And so we're just kind of early on in terms of weighing those options, but I think we have some pretty good options. And so as we, develop what the best case scenario is for RCSC, we'll obviously communicate that. So with that, I would say come on up and ask any questions you want. Yeah. Thanks, Teresa.
I just want to know how far behind do you think you are right now? How many months?
Right now, we're approximately 4 months behind, probably, right now.
I thought the original plan was to be done by September.
Well, the original plan was that we were going to start filling the lake in end of May, June.
April.
Yeah. Well, I remember, I don't have my old schedule, but I remember end of May, June. And then back up to the schedule. There was a schedule that was put together that was part of the pre-construction phase and at award of contract before we had worked through the pre-construction issues and the design. When we got to the construction phase and we had a two-part contract. Our contract was pre-construction and then included a construction modification. When we got to the construction modification, the schedule had been updated and it was the May timeframe. So there was a change that happened there. Currently we're looking at filling sometime in August with completion of filling and turnover sometime in October. So that's the change. So there's two targets. One is start filling the lake, and the other target then is have the lake full and commissioned and turned over.
So if the monsoon starts in July, we'll be ready for them, right?
Well,
it'll help fill the lake.
We're gonna have to deal with monsoons when they start in July. Yes.
all of this silt or dirt that is at the bottom of the lake, where did that come from?
So it is, the majority of it ends up being an earth cover that was placed on top of the liner.
Okay.
And then there's an additional accumulation of probably erosion off of lots, streets, the golf course, and then just an accumulation of organic matter from fish and wildlife is where the rest of the material comes from.
And the water that will eventually fill the lake comes from where?
It comes from an RCSC well. There are 2 wells. One well is the primary well for the Viewpoint Lake. It discharges into, I think it's hole 17 on Lakes West, flows through the center of the golf course, and then drops into the lake coming under Cameo Road. That would be the primary choice. They have a backup well that's on 103rd and Thunderbird. Its primary purpose is to fill the Dawn Lake, but it can be used to fill Viewpoint as well.
Thank you.
And we do have approval from Arizona Department of Water Resources to allow us to refill that lake. So we have that in writing.
I have a question. The dirt on the bottom now, the 2 choices are to screen it and put it back or to haul it away. Are those the 2 choices?
Yes. So the only way we can use the dirt that's on the bottom and keep it on site is to screen it, because to place earth cover on top of the liner, we have to ensure that there's no sharp angular material, and we have to ensure that there's no oversized material. We have to screen it down to a 3/4 inch minus. There's a considerable amount of cobble and cobble materials that are in the soil out there. So that's why we would have to screen. We would have a reject pile, which would be the oversized material, the cobbles. We would keep those on site and use them as more fish habitat. And then we would use the soil and place it as a 12-inch thick earth cover over the top of the liner after the liner's installed.
I can't believe that screening it wouldn't be cheaper than hauling. My God, there must be. I can't imagine how many loads of dirt there are that would need to be hauled away.
So for the last 4 months, that has been my objective, is to not to dump the land or any of the materials into a landfill. And it's to find a farm ground that would accept that material. So we have found that, and it's considerably cheaper than going to a landfill. And so we have an option that is actually probably more economically sound for us. But again, we haven't run the numbers, so we don't know. I don't want to speculate. But those are the 2 options.
I haven't been keeping up with any of this, so I want to ask you, is there any plan at all to put a small 1-boat dock at the launch so a guy can tie his boat up and climb out of there safely? Has there been any plan for that at all? Some of us who don't live on the lake, we fish with our own boats in that lake. And so I was just wondering if there was any plan for a small boat dock there.
At this point, there is no plan to build a dock there. That was never a request, actually, until I just heard you now. So.
Hi, mine is similar to his. The fact that they now allow kayaking in the lake, going to where you put the boats in, trying to get in and out of your kayak safely without falling and busting your head is a little difficult. I've done some research, and kayak dock is not very expensive. It could either be added to the one over by where the paddle boats are, or like he's saying, you have to put a small dock in to put a kayak run in. And it's where you would run your kayak, set your kayak in, and you would push yourself off. Coming back in, it'd be the same thing, but it gives you hand grips to be able to stand up, because we're old And going from where your butt is lower than your knees, it's not always easy. And I'm thinking safety-wise, if they're allowing it. And I've so enjoyed the kayaking there, but on a safety issue, getting in and out that way is not very good. And like I said, if there's more people who like kayaking, and I know there's a house on the lake that has a kayak run on their dock. And I would be willing to do some kind of fundraising to come up with the extra money to put that kayak. I'm not opposed to running some kind of fundraiser to get the money to add that kayak piece in, but I really think it would be really beneficial to the community if they're allowing kayaking there. And I mean, I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to kayak on that lake.
No, I agree. We want to maximize the usage of the lake, and at this point, that's not budgeted. I can't see that it's a large dollar amount, but if you're willing to do that fundraising, that obviously would help. But if we can do what I think we can do from a budgetary perspective, and we have additional budget, we would certainly look at that. And I'm looking to Chris. I mean, he would have to look at the logistics on location and making sure that there's no liability issues, but I wouldn't be disagreeable to doing something. We've already taken a look at putting some spawning beds in, so we'll be working with the Sportsman's Club to understand, the location and things like that. So we think we, may have some budget for that. So it all depends on the next few weeks in terms of what the budget is. So keep that in the back of your head and keep reminding us on that. Okay.
And I would add that the boat launch area is a place where we have vehicles and trailers and boats being put in, and placement of a kayak launch in that area would take some thought to make sure that it is out of the way of those vehicles putting the boats in the lake. So, but we can certainly take a look at it.
The only thought that I had is if it was over where the other paddle boats are, lifting up as a single person a kayak up and over that and then carrying it all the way to the boat launch might be a little difficult.
Given the initial budget, I'm trying to imagine how the problems you've already encountered with the excessive waste at the bottom and, what'd you say, 60, 70,000 cubic meters or something?
Cubic yards.
Cubic yards.
Yeah, from 16,000. I'm trying to imagine how you can stay within budget. I'm trying to imagine what's gonna be required to bring this project in on budget or under budget without RCSC having to find extra dollars to make this thing happen without compromising the initial goals of the project.
So
That means the quality of the repair on this lake, is it going to have to be compromised on some level to bring it in as it was initially envisioned between RCSC and Pacific Aquascape?
No, there's absolutely no difference in terms of the liner and how it's going to be laid. From a budgetary perspective, let Mike and I and PAI let us do our jobs, and we, it's always our objective to make sure that we meet our goal in terms of budget from time and from a money perspective. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but we think in theory we have a way or a method that will keep us under budget.
Let me follow up real quick. I'm actually more concerned about RCSC coughing up more money to make this project do what it needs to do as initially envisioned.
No, that's what I'm saying is I think we have a pathway to keep us within the budget at this point. But again, we're early on and we haven't negotiated anything yet with respect to the trucking and the dumping costs. But the initial phase of the initial pass looks as if we can stay close to that budget.
Will the money be available if you can't get done? How will you go about getting additional cash if necessary?
So that it all comes out of the PIF budget.
Right.
And so we will look at that in terms of what we have available. Fortunately, we had more resales in 2022 than we had budgeted for. So there is additional funding that we receive through the PIF process, which is every resale we get $4,000. So we had more than what we had budgeted. So, but we also have other projects that we're looking at as well. So we have to balance that. But we'll figure it out.
I think it's fair to point out that we also had a contingency number built into the original figure, so that contingency is going to help us cover this ground of extra cost and still probably leave us under budget in total. Contingency.
Yeah, well, I know what that means, but you want to explain what that means?
Well, it's
How much of a contingency?
Yeah, so we have a contingency is, it's a what if scenario where you set aside funds it's basically unassigned cost. So we know what the assigned costs are. PAI gives us those, and then we put in, if any of you have done any type of project management or run projects or even run projects at your house, if you replace your roof or you replace anything major, there's always something that can go wrong, right? Oops, we found a leak in your roof. We didn't know that was there, right? Or we found something. So that's what we have in our projects is we are allowed by our BP Board Policy 7 up to a 10% contingency on our projects. So we stay within our board policy when it comes to contingency.
I can also add just on our costs, we had fixed costs and we had variable costs that were part of the contract. So things like the liner, the shoreline, things that we knew what they were, those are fixed costs with RCSC. Then there are items that are unknown costs, like how much soil material is there on the bottom, what's on the bottom. Nobody knows what's on the bottom, right? We knew there was fish habitat that had been installed, but nobody could tell us what it was, how many of them there were. So we didn't know what there was to deal with. We had a diver in the water. We inspected underwater, one man, swimming the bottom looking for things. And we recorded all that information, and we used that to develop estimates of what those things were, but they're all priced at unit price type options that vary depending on how much there really is. So the soil and the soil material was a per truckload type cost in the budget. And now as we discover there's a lot more truckloads, it creates the problem. So that's where the issue is. But again, there's other moving pieces that are part of the cost. And the goal from RCSC to Pacific Aquascape has always been clear. We have to find a way to stay within the budget. And we've been every time we find an issue, we have an open relationship and we are talking to get to that answer because that's where we understand we have to be.
Corey and Lon they understand. We're very clear, and they've been very, open in terms of, making sure that they meet the pressures that we're putting on them to meet our budget. So it's a good working relationship.
Comment coming in just to affirm the working relationship from an owner with PAI has been excellent. Really appreciate the openness and the communication. So thank you very much for helping to work with us as we're going through. Appreciate it. Second question is, there's been some debate about the trees or bushes, and I understand that we're waiting for a botanist to report. Do we have any update on that?
The decision is trees within 5 feet of the edge are scheduled for removal. We had initially gone through and tagged everything within 3 feet. And so we're going back and we're looking at trees in that 5-foot zone. We have an arborist that is part of our team now, and we are if we can figure a way to save a tree that's kind of right there on the edge of the numbers we're talking about, we'd like to try to do that. All the owners we've come across are different. Every single one of you is individual. Some people have expressed no problem with removing a tree, and other owners have questions and want to talk about it and want to look for options. And we're working through lot by lot, and we continue to do that. So if you have an issue with your lot and you want to talk to us again, or if you want to clarify what's going on, we want to do that too. We are demolishing concrete shoreline. We have run into I'm going to say one or two docks that have created some challenge for us that we haven't resolved yet. They're still open, but we're working on all these issues as we go through. So, but the tree issue was anything within 5 feet was what the botanist came back and told us would be the best solution for the long-term stability of the lake shoreline.
And I want to thank you all for all of the meetings that we've held, and I think for the most part, everybody's been, very agreeable and understanding in terms of what we're trying to do. And, we were just looking at the wall today, and as we pull away that old wall, we're seeing areas where irrigation for these trees that are on the wall have severely deteriorated the underneath part of the wall. And we're, in some areas, I'm surprised that the wall just hadn't crumbled at this point. So, I hope you understand that we really have to be diligent about making sure that we don't have to do any repairs for the next 30 to 40 years on this wall, because they are very expensive. I know Chris had looked at repairing the wall in some areas, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars for not very much footage. So it can become a very expensive, endeavor very quickly. So thank you.
The other one is, do we know if where the tree has to go, does it need to be cut down completely, or can it be topped off so it can grow no more?
I'm going to defer to Lon on that. Lon's not here today. He took a couple of days off, but we would want the botanist to let us know that tree is not going to grow anymore. So I don't know about trees. So if you top a palm tree, is it dead? I don't know. If it is, and it's not going to cause any root issues and root problems, then and we can figure out how to work with it, then I would say it's okay. I don't know if there's any other architectural restrictions or any of those kind of things. That's something I can't speak to.
Thank you.
I don't think we have any with respect to that I can. Chris, I don't know. I don't think so.
With respect to the palm trees, do we have a choice of where you cut it? Because mine all of a sudden got tagged last week, and it's, it's well within the 3 feet thing. So, if you're going to take it out, I want it out. In other words,
the intention is to take it out and to take the root ball out. So the intention is the tree's going to be gone.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and so that's either going to be done, and again, it depends on your yard and what else you have in your yard. If we can pull it out with the excavator that we have pulling the shoreline out, then that's how we'll take it out. We also have the option of grinding the stump and getting it below grade so that you don't know it's there anymore. And we'd prefer to pull the whole thing out, but again, if you had other improvements that were close by and it was going to get damaged by that, then we wouldn't want to do that, and we would prefer to grind it out.
I've got, where my current palm sits, there are actually 2 queen palms that we cut out a number of years ago that are just stumped out there. So while you're at it, you can pull those things out too.
Yeah, I'm sure if you get with Lon and we can we're happy to work with you as best we can. We don't want to enter your yard, but if it's right there, I'm sure we can figure that out.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
I went on some of these meetings with the homeowners to talk about trees, and none of us over here wants to do this. I mean, it's crushing. We get it. We understand that, you become attached to your trees, right? It's not something that we want to do. And again, we really appreciate, how you guys have accepted that. And
Well,
so
along that vein,
yes.
I would tell you that I wish you would have made your minds up 6 months ago, because I wouldn't have got the damn thing trimmed, which is not cheap here. And anyways, but
Well, that cost is gone now. You don't have to trim it in the future.
so my next question, and this is a question that I've asked every meeting I've attended, I expected to hear something about where the fences could go in, and I have heard nothing on that. You told me in the meeting, I think in November, you'd have something out by January. I don't see anything out.
So with respect to that, it's just, we want to make sure that when we make the final decision on all of the architecture and all of the landscaping, that we have, a good definitive plan in place. So there's a group of things that we have to talk about and maybe potentially make changes with respect to the Viewpoint Lake management rules and regulations. So what I want to do is make sure that we have all of those together with respect to what those changes are going to have to be, and that includes fencing. And I want to make sure that we are, I don't want to give you a number and then have to come back and say that number's changed.
How about if I give you a number?
Okay.
I mean, this is the situation. Your wall is going on our property. And the more allowance you insist on for a fence, the more you're annexing our property.
Yeah.
And I have a real problem with that. My house, as I've said before here, was a show home. I'm assuming that that fence that was in, and it was right in the center of the top of the wall.
Yeah.
I couldn't see that it caused any problems over 50 years. Now, maybe there's something I couldn't see, but nothing obvious for sure.
Yeah.
So I understand that the top of the wall is going to be much shorter, and my fence is like, it's 3 feet. It isn't a 10-foot fence, and I know Corey said in the last meeting that makes a big difference whether it's a 3-foot fence or a 10-foot fence.
Right.
So,
And the materials in the fence, I mean, so there's multiple variables that we have to look at, is weight and things like that. So I want to make sure, I wish Lon was here, but from an engineering perspective, I don't believe that there's going to be a large setback for fences that are wrought iron and things like that. It sounded like Lon said that shouldn't be an issue. But my apologies if I committed to a January, but we want to make sure we do it right. And so we will have something to you well in advance of, we can't do anything anyway until we start pouring the wall, right? Until that sets. So anything can't be done until then anyway. But I get it. You want to understand what your options are going to be. So,
well, I want to follow your regulation, but I want your regulation to be reasonable.
yeah, absolutely. I'm going based on the numbers. So if it's, there's probably some weight ratio that I'm an accountant, so I couldn't tell you what those numbers are, but we're going to rely on these guys to help us make sure that we get that number right and do it reasonably. All right, that's the expectation.
Okay, I just, like one rule, it doesn't seem to me that it's going to work. So
You're right. I believe that that's correct. So that's why we have to look at weight. So we'll probably have to have multiple rules for different types of fencing and different materials that people are using for their fencing. So that's why it's not as easy as just saying, hey, it's 2 feet for everybody. That's why, and I don't know, unfortunately, I didn't go to every homeowner meeting, but I believe that there's multiple fences that are associated with each of the lots that we have. So I couldn't tell you what those are, but I'm pretty sure Lon could come back and just say, here's, for this type of fencing, it's going to be this, and this type of fencing, it'll be this. And so we'll have, multiple rules based on the type of fencing.
Have you included any of the homeowners in this discussion?
So every homeowner that had a potential issue, whether it's their dock or with respect to their landscaping, has had an individual meeting with a representative from PAI, typically Lon, and somebody from our organization. So myself, Chris, our director of finance, or Mike. So there was at least 3.
I've had that meeting.
Yeah, so I would say 70% of the homes have had a meeting. You guys can correct me on the numbers. And then there was 30% that really had no issues. The docks were, either they didn't have a dock, or it was not impinging upon the wall and we could work around it, and there was no landscaping that we had to worry about. So there was really no meetings with respect to those. So.
Well, my meeting, I asked the question, it was in August, and I was told at that time they were thinking of maybe 2 or 3 feet from the top of the wall.
Yeah.
Well, that's too much for me. Like, it's just, I wouldn't follow that. Like, that fence is going to go in, because I'm not giving up that much of my property.
Well, I mean, what happens is if you decide not to, and something happens to the wall, then we have an issue, right? I mean, that's
maybe you can beef up your wall so it doesn't happen.
Well, that's at a very large cost. Obviously, cement cost is an extremely high percentage of this job, and so we're putting in a fence that makes sense. So let's not debate here. Let's get to the number first, and then we can debate.
Okay.
Yes, can I assume that if your dock and/or fence is not tagged now, that will not be affected in the future?
It would depend on where you're located.
I'm down on Tantera Point.
So it's not a safe assumption on Tantera Point, because we'll be there in the next couple of days, next week or so. That's where we're at. We're between Canapali and Tantera. We're in that Bayside Bay right there, and we're coming around the corner and we're heading towards where
But
you're
as
at.
far as the markings go,
Yeah, they should
you've
be.
been through there before,
They should
had a
be.
meeting with your people.
They should
and
be
at no
current.
time did they question or tag it. So I'm just assuming that everything is copacetic.
They should be current, but what we find as we get underneath and start to work on some is that we have found they are supported off the lake edge. And so they weren't, there are situations, a handful that we've encountered, where from the top or from getting down on your hands and knees and looking at it from the side above before we could get underneath of them, they don't appear to be supported off of the concrete. But there are several of them where we found that there's either concrete or some kind of wood forms or something else that until we get right underneath it and we're on the work, we haven't seen that they are supported on the wall. So that would be the reason why something could change. And if it does change, we're not going to do anything until we talk to you about it. And if it's not marked now, I would assume that it's not going to come out, but I don't know that. And if Lon was here, he's got his records, but I don't have his records. So I apologize for that. But that's where we're at. If you were whatever it is, east and north of that, we would have I would say you're in the clear. Okay. Yeah, I don't have those records, so I don't know.
I'm one of the problem docs. Last July, I received a letter from Aquascape saying, "You're good to go. We don't need to meet with you. Everything is wonderful." So, happy to hear that. And about a month ago, Lon came over with that guy right there and said, "Oh, we made a mistake. There's a problem with your dock." My dock is a steel dock that's cantilevered into a circle out by the lake. That has a steel superstructure with concrete on the steps. And what they wanted to do, I guess, is just get that steam shovel out there and knock it off. But after we talked for a while, Lon said, I said, well, why can't we just, I've got a piece of concrete underneath the main area of the dock. My dock isn't very wide, maybe 4 or 5 feet. Anyway, there's a piece of concrete that sits underneath that front edge of the dock. And so I said, well, why don't we try to chip that out with some kind of equipment? And Lon said he thought he could do that, but asked that I sign a release in case my dock was damaged, that you guys weren't liable, which I'm perfectly happy to do. They worked around my dock, didn't take the wall off, and I haven't seen anybody or heard from anybody about it. And I just wondered what's going on. And
So yes, I'm familiar with the details with your dock. My concern is that I don't know what is going to be entailed in terms of chipping away the cement. That to me doesn't give me a warm fuzzy, because if we chip away the fence or the cement, and your dock fails at any time, that could pose a serious liability for RCSC. And even if you sign a waiver, that doesn't protect us from a lawsuit. So I have to protect RCSC. And I quite honestly, I'm not comfortable with respect to doing anything with respect to your dock and making it an engineering issue. That the cement is there for a reason, right? So us chipping it away doesn't make me feel comfortable with that.
But nobody has come back to talk to me about a solution. When we started this process, you said that if you had to remove a viable dock, that you would replace it. And
no, we never committed to replacing any docks.
that you would put it back. That you would put it back.
Yes, if that was possible. So there's cantilevered docks that we are going to sever at the what do you call the support? So cut it off at the support, take it off, and then resolder that back together.
Weld
right?
it back on, yeah.
Yeah, weld it back on.
Right. So the challenge with your dock is that you have the concrete interlaced in between the steel framing, and then you have a plaster type finish, cool deck, whatever it's called, across the top of it.
Right.
And it's cantilevered, and so the cantilever there'll be more spring and bounce on it as we pull those footings out that you're talking about, and they sit right on top of the concrete that needs to come out. So yes, we haven't gotten back to you. We've been talking to RCSC at length about it, and it's still an open issue. You're not alone, but you are one of the docks that we have an issue with.
Yeah, obviously I want to keep my dock. And, my consternation was that I was told in July that all was good, don't need to meet with you. And then, a month ago, I get this visit saying your dock's not viable. And
I understand your frustration, but again, when we had these meetings, the lake was full, and Lon couldn't go out there and really understand the complete mechanics of every dock. And so as we pull away, the wall and the structure, we're seeing that there are some that, are difficult issues that we have to deal with.
So when am I going to know?
So signing a waiver, it's a discussion that we have to have with our attorney to say, does this even make sense? Because if you sell the house, then the next owners aren't, how are they part of that waiver? They're not, and they may not sign a waiver. So now we do have a liability issue if something happens, and so that's the issue. So my gut right now is that we will not honor that waiver. We won't go the waiver route. I don't know if there's another engineering way to, I don't know if Lon was going to take a look at an alternative to doing something, or if there is no alternative. But at this point, I think I have to take that position from an RCSC perspective.
Right. But you also, this isn't the forum to argue it, but you also can't damage my property, like the circle that dock is cantilevered out of.
So let's do this. Let's schedule a meeting with you. So if you guys can let Lon know, and we'll come out and let's talk through it.
Okay.
Okay.
That'll be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
I'm going to practice for the Super Bowl.
Just a follow-up question. The cement wall is really intriguing to me. I have a lot of questions about it, and I won't bore everyone with those questions, but I am curious about the way it was poured initially. It seemed to be feathered in to the side. The top of it was feathered in. There was no header, or I'm not sure what you call it, like a curb that anchored the top of the wall. And I'm curious, how is that going to be? How will the cement be poured in there? Will it be feathered in again into the top of our property with our fence? Like my fence line is set back about 1.5 feet, 18 inches or something from the cement on the top.
It's going to depend because we have so many different situations. For the most part, it's going to look and be very similar to what you had before. In cases where we have situations where there's a fence that stays that we're just going to tie right back into, and that's what's going to happen in that situation. We have situations where it's landscape materials, and our goal is to finish it off so that it blends uniformly with your landscape materials and looks uniform and in a clean line. Some of it may end up with a form on it to pour against a form type edge. And some of it, the soil may be able to work as the form, and we'll just finish the top of it so that from a surface, it comes out and it'll look finished. The shoreline is going to be regraded first. Right now, you've got this big, tall bank that sits out there. The bank is going to be shortened, so we're going to be doing a fill operation where we're regrading the lake shoreline. And so it won't be so tall. The concrete that was on the slope, varied in thickness all over the place. I mean, we found an inch or less, and we rarely find more than 3 inches. The concrete we're placing will be 4 inches thick, kind of everywhere on the slope section. It'll have a keyway in it. There's no keyway on what's out there right now. It's a different shoreline than what you have, but we're trying to work the top out so that it's not different for you, and that's our goal. The top also moves around. The lots that are generally on the west side of the lake, along Buccaneer, Emerald Point, up to Cameo, the top of the shoreline on those lots is only 6 or 8 inches above normal water surface. Right. By the time we get to the other side of the lake, over where you're at on Tantera and 103rd, it's like 18 inches to one lot's almost 20 inches. Okay. And so there's a big variation in the amount of concrete that's exposed. And we talked a lot on our design side about how we could fix that, but the problem was, or the issue is, that each of you has an individual experience in your backyard, and to come up with a uniform solution where we would make the shoreline the same height everywhere, we would have to grade into the lots that are on the Tantera 103rd Street side, and that just doesn't work because you guys all have a it's your property, you got something going on back there. So we said, okay, we're just going to match grade for grade how it is. If it is what it is, we're going to match what it is. And it's going to look and be very similar to what you have right now, except it's going to be thicker.
Yeah. So you're going to be hitting my house anytime. You're around 68 or something. So I'm 75, and I'm eagerly anticipating you being out there so I can chat with you all. I'm actually very fascinated with what you're doing and the quality of what you're doing. I'm your biggest supporter, I really am, even though I have questions. So should I be home so we can talk about cutting my brand new $3,500 8x10 dock? Because you're going to need to remove it, I think, with a crane or something. I don't know what you're going to do. God bless you for figuring it out. I should probably be home there then. I'm number 75.
I've noticed that there's always activity in the yard on everywhere we're working. So I would expect you to be there, but I don't know what your plans are. So
Okay,
yeah.
all right, fair enough.
Hi. Being from a kayaking point of view too, I know the walls now are on a slant. And from, there's always stores and he said, she said. And I was told that the fact that those will be changed so there's a ledge underneath in case somebody falls in for safety and liability issues. Because now it's sloped and it's very difficult to get out if you fall in, although there are many docks you can crawl over or swim over to. And I always felt you shouldn't be on the lake without a life preserver on. Everybody claims to be a good swimmer till they drowned. And so I was, I was under the impression there was going to be some kind of a ledge system if somebody falls in to get out.
Yeah, so the new shoreline will be more vertical. So it's steep, it'll be steeper than what there is right now. Right now it lays on approaching a 1-to-1. So every foot you go over, you go down one. It'll be about half of that. It'll be steeper. But when you hit 2 foot, immediately adjacent to the edge, there will be 2 feet of water. Right now, there's about 3.5 feet of water immediately adjacent to the edge, so there'll be 2 feet. And then there will be a sloped concrete bench that's 6 feet wide, and it'll be laying on a 5-to-1 slope. So it'll be about 3 feet of depth, 6 feet away, and that'll be concrete. So if you are near the edge, you'll be standing on, be able to get firm footing on that concrete edge. And you would be able to stand up, and now it will be an edge that you should be able to step up and climb out of.
Do we know the water level when it'll be finished? Will it be?
It's going to be the same as it was.
Okay.
And so when you say that, it moves all over the place. But because the lake is on a manual fill setup, so it takes an RCSC. RCSC has to make the decision to turn the well on. It was automated, I think, way back when, but my understanding is it's currently not automated today. There is an overflow that's over by 103rd, and we picked that, and we picked an elevation on that. We observed the lake for quite a while, and that's the elevation we have. We have a benchmark on that. Our surveyors tied that in, and that's the elevation that we're going to use to establish the lake. But for all practical purposes, the lake's most likely going to be managed exactly like it was before, and the elevation is going to fluctuate in the range that it fluctuated before. In a rain event, the lake's going to be a couple inches fuller because that's how it's designed. That's how it was set up. You don't want just a windstorm to come up and have waves lapping and then water roll down your overflow channel. So you always set the lake a couple of inches below that overflow elevation so that when you get little wind chop or something, it doesn't start rolling out onto the street. And so that would be the high elevation where you should turn the well off. And then this lake's used for irrigation purposes, and there's evaporation, and so the lake fluctuates based on that. And it needs to be refilled, and that's the purpose of the well. And, RCSC has a long history with this. They know the details of it. It's going to be a little bit different now because we're going to lose the foot of seepage loss every month. So that's going to be gone, which means they shouldn't have to use, or they won't have to use the well as much as they did to fill it up. But again, for all practical purposes, the water surface is going to be the same as it was.
If we set our statutory docks better where it was before.
Yeah, unless you didn't like how it worked before and the rules let you move it around. I don't recall the rules. I've seen the rules, and I shouldn't say I don't know them. I just don't recall if there was any freeboard or distance required on the bottom step. I don't remember what that was.
Thank you.
Okay, great questions. Oh, one more.
Hi. Concerning, I got two concerns. Putting a small boat dock over by the launch is probably not a bad idea. Our pontoon motor went out, and I had to have guys in a trailer come get us out. Well, actually, I called Barry from RCSC. Him and a buddy came down in the little pontoon, and they threw us a rope and towed us up to the launch. Well, there we were stuck because there was no way to, we had no engine. We couldn't get up the ramp to get onto the trailer. Barry called some guys. We threw lines off over to the lagoon area. They helped pull. I was on the other side where the offices are with a line pulling. The guy in the truck had to take his shoes off and he went down the slimy ramp to get into the water waist deep to get to our boat, and the little pontoon boat that RCSC has didn't have the horsepower to push us, but somehow between several people, we finagled our way up. A dock would have been handy and a lot safer than him sliming into the water. We could have pulled over, tied off, figured it out, whatever. And then if you go to Pinterest, you'll see these docks, and you'll see the kayak launches. They're $1,500, $2,000, for a kayak launch, and they show homemade ones and prefabricated ones. So go check Pinterest on docks and kayak launches. Really interesting, because I'm looking at doing it. So it's like, if I can hook that onto my dock, I will, because I have kayaks. The next thing would be the sewage. When we had our last meeting, you said the map showed like 3 inlets of water coming in, I get off road runoff or whatever, but it turned out there quite a bit more, like you said, something like 6 or 8 runoffs coming into the lake of, I guess better words would be sewage or whatever. Are those we're going to maintain that same amount of sewage coming into this lake? Is it going to be capped off?
It's not sewage.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Stormwater. Storm, yeah.
Right, so there are storm drains that drain the street. And we were aware of 3 of them based on the information that we had, and we've now found out that there's 12 or 10 or 12. And they're all going to remain where they are, and they will be the type of material. They're not easily extended. They're made out of what's called asbestos concrete pipe, and if we touch them, we can't touch them because we're not certified.
Asbestos, yeah.
Right, we're not certified to do that. So if we can, it's not that we can't touch them. We can't cut them,
yeah,
or we can't demolish or break them. If we do that, then we have to call the hazmat team in, and they have to deal with them. So we're working, and we've identified all these with RCSC, and they're all staying in place, and we're working around them.
Yeah, because what the lake was built 50 years ago, and the volume of people was less than it is now, and traffic and vehicles and the grime that's coming in off of road runoff, and animal and human waste. And you can't tell me that there's not homeless people out there doing something they shouldn't be doing. Drugs and paraphernalia. Shit comes into that little lake. Food bags come in there, waste. to somehow curb the amount of stuff that comes into the lake.
And we have a biologist, as you guys know, come in monthly, right, Chris? So we're always testing the water, and if there's we haven't had any major issues with respect to the runoff. Unfortunately, we really can't do anything. We can't start capping runoff, and then the county comes back and says, hey, 99th Avenue's backed up every time we have a storm because you cut that runoff off. They would immediately force us to uncap that. So we have to keep everything intact.
All right.
Meet me halfway.
Hi, I raised the question the last meeting, I think it was November, as far as getting back to costs on the hauling away the spoils there, the silt, and so I could see there's going to be many, many truckloads, and raised the question whether if that could be reused, and I think you said at that point no. My question, if you're talking about screening, is I think you said 3/4 inches, which shouldn't be a hard standard to meet. Possibly bringing in a mobile screening plant or something. That's number one. And then number two is, would you still have to haul away some of the spoils because of sedimentation over the years coming off the storm drain? In other words, is there more material, or could you use all of that material?
If the decision is made to screen, all the material would stay on site. It's hard to get an exact number on what's out there, but we have a pretty good feel for it. We've been operating the dozer across, 70% of the lake right now. We've trenched, in order to get rid of the last water, we trenched several trenches through the soil liner and broke the liner so that the water would seep into the ground, the last of the water. And so we see that soil depth that's on top is somewhere in the 12 to 24 inch range. We found a couple of pockets of it that are 36 inches thick. We found some depressions on the floor that kind of don't make any sense from how they graded it, because all of a sudden they just dug a trench, and the trench is 600 feet long and 2 feet deep, and all of a sudden it filled up with 3 feet of silt in it. But so we're not exactly sure that's what we're finding though. And so the math on it is, we've done some testing on how much reject we would get. It looks like about 15% of the material would be generated as a rock type of reject. We would use that to build additional fish habitat structures or spawning beds or whatever, so it would stay in place. It just wouldn't be part of the earth cover operation. The earth cover has to go in a minimum of 12 inches thick in order to maintain the warranty with the liner manufacturer. We can't work on top of the liner without a minimum of 12 inches of soil. But we can have 16 inches of soil, so we can, if there ends up being more material, we can use it. We don't have to haul it away if we screen. There will be material that leaves the site. We've demolished some docks. That's going to go to the dump. We've cut down trees. That's going to go to a disposal facility, probably recycled. Some of the fish habitat material is going to go to the dump because it just, as you pick it up, it kind of falls apart. If we can reuse it, we will. And so, there is materials going to the dump. Anything that can be salvaged will be salvaged. And then the jury's still out on, do you haul it all off, or do you reuse it? Do we reuse it? So that's the decision we're trying to make.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then thank you again, and keep a lookout for the next meeting. All right.
Copywritten production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.